I'm Steve Wood, recovered alcoholic, and this what we're covering today is some of my favorite stuff. I mean, it's I like to call the controversial stuff that if you bring it up at meetings and stuff like that, it might be a tad, people don't really want to hear it. We're going to start off on page 19. Where it says, we concluded. It says, we've concluded to publish an anonymous volume setting site. The problem, setting site, I'm sorry, we continue to set anonymous volume setting forth the problem as we see it. We shall bring to task our combined experience and knowledge. This should suggest a wonderful program. Useful program. I'm way ahead of myself for anyone concerned with the drinking problem. Of necessity, there will be discussion of matters medical, psychiatric, social, and religious. We are aware that these matters are from their very nature, controversial. Nothing would please us more as to write a book which would contain no basis for contention or argument. We shall do our utmost to achieve that ideal. So an ideal is an aim we have. And by following an ideal leads us to growth. And we'll talk more about ideals as they come along, especially when we get to step 4 through 9. Most of us sense that real tolerance of others, people's shortcomings, defects, and viewpoints, and a respect for their opinions are attitudes which make us more useful to others. So let's talk about the word controversial for a moment. Controversial is something, it's a very interesting word because it's something that it's a, something that has a disputed nature about, maybe opposing views, maybe an opinion, an idea that isn't generally accepted or agreed upon by everybody. That can lead, conflict, ugly debates, arguments. My spiritual advisor told me many years ago, the second you open your mouth at any meeting and you speak the solution, you become instantly controversial. And it's not just because we use words like necessity or now, or it's not just because we know the book. It's not just because we offer a solution. We're controversial because we don't share the same experience as them. We're bringing in something that sounds kind of crazy in a sense, that we've had a spiritual awakening and everything we look at is different. It's not their fault. They are not where we're at. And that's it. They have an experience. And how do you know something is from experience? And many of them have no desire to even do the steps. So, so they just think we're full of crap. Is it bad that we come across controversial? Yes and no. I mean, no, because when something is controversial, you demanded someone's attention. You've really got their attention, and they may not even, even if they don't like it. I mean, if there's a difference between someone not paying attention to you and someone listening to you and going, wait a minute, this guy's really crazy. You demand their attention. It also means others are listening. You affected them in some way. The book is controversial because it's a radical change and transformation. And Bill mentions, we said there, the controversial things were medical, psychiatric, social, and religious. So let's look at those words real quick. And medical is the diagnosis, treatment, prevention of disease or illness. Maybe you could say injury in there too. And the study and practice, of course, medicine. What's part of the book is medical. Doctor's opinion, the allergy, the obsession. That's the medical facts, right? So that's the part that's medical. So what makes it controversial? When Silkworth wrote Doc's opinion, he was putting his medical reputation on the line. And he was a doctor backing up a movement whose remedy was not, for alcoholism, was not medical, but spiritual. So you can imagine how controversial it was, especially in 39, when this book came out. But his medical view that the alcoholic suffers from an illness of not just the mind, but also the body was radical, because we talked about that before in here a lot. The previous 100 years or longer, it was looked at as a mental thing, right? Alcoholics were being, put in institutions because doctors believe it was just medical. The next one is psychiatric, which is a branch of the medical profession that only deals with the study and diagnosis and treatment prevention of mental, emotional, behavioral disorders, right? Which part of the book is psychiatric? That would be page 64 to page 71. That's the inventory process. It's very psychiatric. So some people are going, what's he talking about? But the part of that makes it psychiatric is not the confession part. Some people think I mean that, because it's not the couch part. The part that makes it psychiatric is step 4, the inventory process, the third column, the effects the instincts, because in that section you discover how pride, how high self-esteem and low self-esteem, emotional and material security, pocketbook security drive our thinking and make us make decisions that we probably shouldn't do. But by knowing what drives our thinking, that's the instincts, we discover why we always blamed others, why we're always so upset, why we let fear run our life, why we judge others. So basically we discover why we're angry. And we know why so we finally know why we have resentment and guilt. I couldn't become aware of those instincts by just thinking about them or reading a book. That's why the inventory is a gift. What makes it controversial? Anything that asks a person to open themselves to an examination of their hate of others, why they harmed, their deepest fears they try to keep hidden, and also demands complete honesty, rigorous honesty, is controversial. So the next one is social. And social is interactive with an individual or group. Which part is social? Of course, chapter 7, working with others. That's the part of the book that's social. It's about, that social interacting with other alcoholics help them achieve sobriety. And there are numerous other parts that refer to working with others in this book. It tells us how to treat those who are spiritually sick. It speaks of gatherings with others and meetings. It's a little different than today, but which part of recovery isn't social? Think about it. What makes it controversial is a better one. What makes it controversial is because it tells us on 14, if we must work with others or we die. And they don't mean death, they mean, going back to the cycle of drinking. It also is controversial because not many want to sponsor. So they hear that. The last one is religious. And this is, it's faithful devotion to an accepted gods or spiritual beings. What part of the book is considered religious, ideas? We agnostics, and just, about anything else from, in the first 164 pages, the word God is all over the place in this book. Matter of fact, in the first 164 pages, it's in there 130 times. 130 times, 34 times, I'm sorry. And 62 more times the words God, like, creator, father of light, great reality, maker, power greater than myself, himself, yourself, whatever, all those thee, thy. And then don't think of, don't forget words like he, him, or his. It's almost 200 times in this book. God's all over the place. And he uses the word spiritual, because it's way less controversial. And it was a very popular time with the metaphysics movement going on in the US time, around the world. But what makes it controversial? One word, God. The most controversial subject known to man is God. And I've attended meetings where you can't say the word God. Too much God talk, they yell out. Or, how sad is that? I mean, God is the nucleus of the program. God as you understand him. Not the one I have, not the one you have, or he has, or anyone has. But it's the nucleus of the program, and people do not want to talk about it. The word God is only controversial in the mind's eye, though. It's very important. And I always like to bring this up, and this is controversial what I'm about to say, and I'm not saying I believe this. I'm just giving you food for thought. This around the subject of religion is, I've heard this is called in debate as AA religion. Some people go, no, but the definition of religion is any formal institution which practices the worshiping of gods or God or spiritual beings with the beliefs and practices formally agreed upon by numerous people. Just thrown out there, very interesting. I've heard that debate before, like people that don't like AA and people that like AA. So, here's a promise now it has after all that stuff. Our very lives as problem drinkers depend upon our constant thought of others and how we may meet their needs. That's very hard for someone who comes from a self-centered mind, right? Remember, selfishness is tending mostly my own needs with low or no thought of others, right? I believe there's no way I can have constant thought of others. I told that to my sponsors. There's no way. My sponsor says, you're right, because right now you can't. That was at the beginning of my journey. It's transformation. It's about change and transformation. Transformation must occur. So see what else it says. You may already have asked yourself, why is it that all of us became so very ill from drinking? He's not talking about throwing up in the garbage can, right? He's talking about something else. Doubtless you are curious to discover how and why, in the face of expert opinion to the contrary, we have recovered, there's that word again, and it's going to tell us what we recovered from, a hopeless condition of mind and body. That's the allergy obsession. If you are an alcoholic who wants to get over it, who doesn't, right? You already ask yourself, what do I have to do? How many times did you yell that out? What do I have to do? If it's dealing with the resentment, if it's dealing with your obsession, if you're dealing with drinking again, look what it says here. What do I have to do? We yell that out. It is the purpose of this book to answer such questions specifically. Wow, it's beautiful. They're telling us that they're giving us an answer that we cannot answer. And the most baffling thing about alcoholism, in my opinion, one of the most baffling things is that most alcoholics will never know what an alcoholic is. Right now there's thousands of people dying of alcoholism. In their 50s, 60s, they've never even heard of Alcoholics Anonymous. We're so lucky, and then even more sad truth is there's people that call themselves alcoholic who don't know what alcoholic is. I didn't know what alcoholic was, and I'm raising my hand in a meeting saying, I'm Steve, alcoholic. And what is alcoholic? Oh, someone who drinks too much. And we found out in doctor's opinion that's not the case. It's the allergy obsession. And let's keep going here. Let's see what it says. We shall tell you what we have done before going into some detailed discussion, and maybe we'll to summarize some points as we see them. How many times people have said to us? Now, the people they're speaking here referring to are what we like to call normies, and that's a normie is someone who does not have the allergy obsession. Even if it was explained to them, they would not understand it because they have not experienced it. I mean, how do you know something? From experience. Anything else is a theory, right? Anything else is a theory. So I got to have direct experience with something. I could give you a theory of what Ireland's like, but until I go visit Kevin there and hang out with him for a week, I would experience it, and I could come back and I would know what it's like. That's what they're talking about here. Think about that. So it says, so these normies say things like, I can take it or leave it alone, why can't he? They say that because they can take it or leave it alone, right? Because they can. And it says, why don't you drink like a gentleman or quit? If a person, swears a lot and a person says, speak like a gentleman, they're asking that person to control what they say, right? On the contrary, if someone says, is an alcoholic and they say, drink like a gentleman, they're asking you to control your drinking. Again, if you're not alcoholic, that works. And they're going to tell us that. My father told me that. That fellow can't handle his liquor. You know, they see us all hammered and tripping over ourselves. They say that because they can't handle their liquor, right? Why don't you try beer and wine? You know, they say whiskey's bad, you know, switch to this, drink Mad Dog 2020, which I don't know if you guys have that where you live, but it's horrible. Again, that works for, you know, for them. They can do that. They can switch from beer to wine. I have a friend that used to do drugs and alcohol, and he switched to becoming a wine drinker, and he can drink moderately. He wasn't one of us, and he's a normal person now. Just lay out the hard stuff. It's all hard stuff. Look, here's one of my favorites. Willpower must be weak. Our willpower is weak with the first drink because of the obsession, but our willpower is strong because of the allergy. We want more once we start, nothing to get in our way of that. Look at this one. He could stop if he wanted to. I remember watching, there's a show like a police officer, Cops is called here in the United States. And it's a reality show about police. And there's this crackhead on the show getting arrested, and he's like destroying things. And he's like, you know, knocking on all the police officers. And I'm watching with my father-in-law, and he's all, you know, this guy could stop if he wanted to. I'm like sitting there laughing. He's like looking at me like I'm crazy because the guy he's an addict, you know. But my father-in-law, that's what he did. He had you know, some drug issues, and he stopped for good. Doesn't need to go to AA. I mean, not saying the steps couldn't help him. She's such a sweet girl. I should think he would stop for her sake. A normal person drinks, you know, a little too much. And something other tells them, if you don't quit, I'm leaving. And they quit for good. And he sees an alcoholic again, and you know, they think we can do the same thing as they did. We can't. The doctor told him if he drank, you know, it would kill him, and there he is, all lit up again. This one truly mystifies those normies, because any disease where a doctor says stop or you will be dead, the patient does without question. And sometimes there's someone with us when they tell us to quit drinking or you're dead. So they are really blown away when they see us drunk or continue to drink after the doctor gives us a death sentence. And that's kind of the time where the parents cut them off. I mean, good ways. I never liked the thing when parents say, my kid's dead to me. It makes me sick. I understand praying for them and cutting them off, but saying that. Again, but the families say that because they can do that. So you would think these sayings like these would never enter the walls of Alcoholics Anonymous. But they do. I've heard people in meetings say, you can stop if you want to. I'm like, what? I heard people say that to a newcomer who's struggling. Just don't take the first drink and you won't get drunk. Okay. Or I choose not to drink today. It tells us opposite of that in the book. It says we're without choice. No defense. It's, you know, the big question is why do people say this stuff? Let's keep going. Now, these are commonplace observations of drinkers we hear all the time. Back of them is a world of ignorance and misunderstanding. So what is ignorance? I thought ignorance was the same thing as stupidity, but stupidity is lack of intelligence, where ignorance is lack of knowledge. Again, how do you know something? From experiencing it, right? So you see a person with knowledge, you know, a person with knowledge sees no reason to defend the truth because they've experienced it. So they give short, precise answers, and a person with ignorance is going to give you long-winded answers based on theories, never get to the point. You know, it's just the same as a person with knowledge is open-minded to new ideas, and a person with ignorance will continue to argue ideas using misinformation they've never experienced. And, you know, people with knowledge have freedom, and people with ignorance are very restricted. And the thing is people with ignorance know, and people with knowledge know, and people with ignorance think they know everything. It's the illusion of knowledge. And I was very ignorant when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. Even though I was alcoholic, I thought I knew everything. And my sponsor, I said, I know everything. He says, no, you're an asshole. Basically what he told me. You know, he said, but you know, there's an old saying, you know, arguing with the ignorant fool creates two ignorant fools. And I remember outside of a meeting, and this guy, this is years ago, came up to me and says, you said recovered, you can't be recovered. And I said, well, it's in the book. And I sat there arguing for 10 minutes, and I watched the guy turn to my sponsor and say the same thing. And my sponsor says, you know what, that's the best information I've ever heard. He walks away. And since then, I got in the car with him, and he goes, why are you being the bleeding deacon? He goes, you're sitting there arguing. And he says, you know, arguing with the ignorant fool made you look like an ignorant fool. And I went, oh, so I quit doing that. So now these are commonplace observations on drinkers we hear all the time. Back of them is a world of ignorance and misunderstanding. We see that these expressions refer to people whose reactions are very different from ours, meaning the reaction to alcohol. So the difference in reaction is they can take it or leave it alone. The reaction is different from us, is that we do not crave it. I mean, they do not crave more. You know, when they put alcohol in their system, they do not crave more. And they're ignorant because they do not know what it's like to experience an allergy obsession. My wife is a normie, right? And I've taken her through some of this, you know, a 4-step before. She's come to my book studies. She knows the big book really well. She understands the steps very well, except step 1. She will never understand step 1 because she's never experienced allergy. How could she know what it's like to be powerless? It's impossible. So in the next few pages, we're going to talk about, and this is a controversial stuff here, if this hasn't been controversial already. We're going to talk about 3 types of drinkers. My suggestion is underline the word reason. So reason is the power to think and understand and form judgments. And how do we do that? By logic, right? If people show good reason not to do something, it means they have thought things through with logic. So I'm going to put up a slide. Okay, I think everyone can see that. So the first one is the moderate drinker. Moderate drinkers have little trouble giving up liquor entirely. If they have a good reason for it, they can take it or leave it alone. So their mental is they can stop for a good reason, good reason. A good reason might be that, you know, someone close to them died from alcoholism or OD'd, or perhaps they got sick when they took that one shot, whatever it was. Maybe they hate the taste. Maybe they got a DUI or arrested or scared straight because they do not have the mental obsession they not use against their will. And self-knowledge can help them, stop them, and they can stay stopped in self-knowledge. So mental, they can stop for a good reason. How about the body's response? Can they control their drinking? They do not experience the phenomenon of craving. So they can control their drinking. They have, you know, a normal reaction to alcohol, which means they drink a few drinks, they get a little rush feeling and stuff, and then as soon as they get a little tipsy, they go, 3 is good enough for me. And they're drinking little tiny shots and with fruit in their drinks and stuff. But they never crave it. And so they have a few drinks and they don't go further, like I said. And how about powerlessness? Not powerless. They have human power, and that's the ability to solve problems using human resources because they do not have the obsession or allergy, human aid. Now, the next one is the hard drinker that everybody likes to pick apart, right? This is also the heavy drinker or drunk. Then we have a certain type of hard drinker. He may have the habit badly enough to gradually impair him physically and mentally, It may cause him to die a few years before his time. If it's sufficiently strong reason, ill health, falling in love, change your environment, warning of a doctor, becomes operative, this man can stop or moderate, and though he may find difficult and troublesome and may even need medical attention. So let's look at this hard drinker. Mental can stop for a good reason. So let's do the hard drinkers test real quick. Did ill health stop you from drinking? Not me. Falling in love? No. Change of environment or warning of a doctor? I remember going to the doctor and I was about 25 years old. And the doctor goes, do you drink? And I'm all, no. And then he pokes my liver real hard and he goes, do you drink? And I'm all, ow. And he goes, well, someone that doesn't drink is going to have cirrhosis in about 7 years. All I heard was 7 years. I didn't hear anything else. That's the way the obsession works. It drowned out the fact that I'm going to have a liver transplant by the time I'm 35 if I don't stop drinking, or be dead. All I heard was 7 more years and I got to deal with that. And there's other things that could stop these people from drinking. DUIs, being arrested, divorce, the ultimatum from the wife, CPS, that's Child Protective Services in the United States we have, that comes to the house. The wife taking the kids, or threatening to take the kids, the threat of being fired from a job if you have a job, the bank taking your house if you have a house. All that stuff can stop them from drinking for good, right? Join a group where you can't drink can stop them from being good. These things stop them. Interventions work with these people because they respond to reason. They get a group of people that say, we're not going to talk to you anymore unless you stop drinking. Okay. Now you watch a real alcoholic go through that, they laugh. Yeah, whatever, dude. That doesn't work for us. It's not what happens here. And, they can use willpower and self-knowledge. Humiliation and suffering, embarrassment happens. They get arrested, they stop for good. And they can stop because it's within the realm of common sense. Alcohol is not cunning, baffling, and powerful because they have no mental obsession. The body's response is they can control their drinking. They do not experience phenomenal craving. They do not go on a run. They can stop when they want to. They can tell you exactly how much they're going to drink. I'm going to have 5 tonight. Okay, and they get to the 5th and the 4.5. I'm going to drink this much more. Doesn't work for us, that way. And they can tell you down. They write them out. They're not powerless. They have human power. Again, human aid. They solve their problems using human resources because no allergy, no obsession. I want to point out, it says habit in there. In doctor's opinion, it says describes a person that what the allergy is of once having had the habit, found they cannot break it. A habit is a reoccurring action or established custom that's, we do regularly, sometimes unconsciously. And the difference between a drinking habit or addiction and is alcoholism and addiction is a mentally, physically dependent upon alcohol or drugs due to mental obsession and physical allergy. A person with a drinking habit can stop for a good reason. When a drinking habit cannot be broken, they are a problem drinker. It's an addiction. Habits cannot be broken by human power. Habits can be broken by human power. Addiction cannot. I'm going to read you guys. This is from 1937, the manuscript that Silkworth wrote. And he's going to give a little bit more about this hard drinker. And this is 1937, before probably right when he started writing the big book. Here's what he said about hard drinkers. Normal drinkers, that's a hard drinker, can drink from choice and not from necessity. They can find alcohol a pleasant stimulation and release from anxieties. It's not a dominant factor in their lives. If they have a desire to stop drinking, they can do it without struggle. If for any reason they decide to swear it off, there is no problem. no struggle, no citric, citric consequences must be met. Nothing but the inconvenience of interruptions or usual customs. For one reason or another, he has decided that the reasons to stop drinking are greater than those to continue it. I wish it was that easy for us. They have no need to lean upon anyone else or anything outside of themselves for support. Alcohol is not a necessity to them. So the real alcoholic. What about the real alcoholic? He may start off as a moderate drinker. He may or may not become a continuous hard drinker, but at some stage of a drinking career, he begins to lose all control of his consumption once he starts to drink. This is who this book is written for. This is the people that were in the asylums. These are the people, hard drinkers didn't get lost in asylums because once they went to jail, they stopped for good because they were fear of going to the asylums. No one wanted to go there. The alcoholic drank, even the obsession would make them drink, even they knew the asylums existed. So mental does not respond to reason. We saw that a moderate drinker can stop for a good reason, hard drinker for a strong reason. Can an alcoholic stop for reason? Does not. Reason does not exist because we have a mental obsession, reoccurring, persistent idea of drinking that does not respond to reason. That's it right there. And it also has no choice, lacks choice. The hard drinker can stop because of within the realm of common sense, but the real alcoholic, because of the obsession, common sense and reason are out the window. It's like they don't exist. We think about the stuff, but it just floats away. And alcohol in its liquid form is not cunning, baffling, and powerful. People run around AA for years and they claim they did the steps and they go and liquor out at the stores or wherever they go and they freak out. Because they still have the obsession. Alcohol is not cunning, baffling, and powerful. The obsession is because we're going to get loaded despite knowing the consequences involved. We're going to get drunk despite knowing all the consequences, and it's not going to stop us. We drink against our will because the obsession, humiliation, and suffering can't stop us. There's no defense against it. All desire to stop is crushed. Believe it or not, one of the greatest descriptions comes from the movie The Terminator with Arnold Schwarzenegger. I don't know if you're familiar with that movie, but there's a scene in that where the guy that's hunting the Terminator is describing one to the lady, and he says, "It cannot be bargained with. It cannot be reasoned with. It does not feel pity, remorse, or fear, and it absolutely will not stop until you're dead." Sounds like the obsession. Sounds just like it. Bodily response. This is what separates us. What really separates us. Loss of all control of our consumption once we start to drink. People always ask me, what about the hard drinkers? Do they have an obsession? Not like ours, because our obsession wants to feed the allergy, right? That's a big difference right there. But, this is the allergy is what makes us alcoholic. The obsession keeps us there. But, once we start to drink, control is the ability, it's to have power and ability to influence and direct and stop a course of events. Loss control is what? The inability to stop and control, right? Abnormal reaction to a substance. Well, we have allergy. That's why it's called an allergy. Phenomena, craving. Loss means to fail. Real alcoholics fail at the ability, to control their drinking. I mean, flat out. Powerless, lacks human power. That's where we're at. Powerless. No human power. Zero. Does not exist. Real alcoholics do not have the ability to solve their obsession and allergy using human resources. Hopeless condition of mind and body. It's impossible to solve their problems on their own power. We have a mind that condemns us to drink against our will and a body that condemns us to death. Here's a better one, is we can't stop when we start, and when we are stopped, we can't stop from starting. That's us right there. That's who this book is written for. It's the physical reaction to alcohol coupled with the overwhelming desire to pick up a drink and makes us an alcoholic and separates us from those hard drinkers. So let's look at these one more time all together. The moderate drinker, they can stop for a good reason, right? That's their mental aspect. They can control their drinking and they're not powerless. Hard drinkers, the same thing, but they can stop for a strong reason, a little bit more reason, right? A teeny bit more. Can control their drinking, has human power, no powerlessness. Real alcoholic does not respond to reason, loss of control, consumption once they start drinking, no human power. This is, like I said, who this book is written for. And, there's hard drinkers and real alcoholics are polar opposites, oil and water. Hard drinkers do not crave more when they drink. Real alcoholics lose all control. The hard drinker can stop because it's within the realm of common sense. Like I said, real alcoholics, there's no common sense. It's out the window. Hard drinkers can ponder over the consequences. Real alcoholics, there's no consequences. We know the consequences are, they just don't come to mind. Hard drinkers choose not to drink. Real alcoholics lack choice. I mean, hard drinkers can stop based on humiliation and suffering. Suffering doesn't even come to mind. The hard drinker responds to reason. We don't respond to reason. The hard drinkers can stay sober based on the power of others, the power of the group. Real alcoholics have no human power, no human power, no power in group. Hard drinkers, human power is insufficient to stay sober. Alcoholics need a power greater than themselves. The hard drinker have defense against the first drink. We fail defense against the first drink. So the hard drinkers go to rehab. It says, we read a few minutes ago, they may even need medical attention, right? Do they do the steps? Most likely not, but some do, depending on who they get, if they even want a sponsor. Because a strong reason, not to drink, the basis, that is not the basis of recovery. They come to AA and they go to meetings daily. They rely on others to follow a few slogans. They believe the primary purpose of AA is to stay sober, meaning they can stay sober using on a non-spiritual basis. And if they slip and drink again, they come to the meeting the next day and says, I need to go to more meetings. And that rubs off on the real alcoholic newcomer right next to them. So do they believe people drink again because, so they believe people drink again because they stop going to meetings. They believe you will always be recovering and never be recovered. And they stay sober the rest of their life using a model of social recovery, meetings. They do not need, group therapy. They do not need to change anything about themselves to be sober. We're unlike us, we're alcoholics. We need personality change sufficient to bring about recovery. Here's the question: are hard drinkers dangerous? Yes and no. I don't like to say they're dangerous, but if a real alcoholic attempts the hard drinker's social recovery plan that I mentioned above, they could die. And what makes them dangerous is the easier, softer middle road solution they offer the newcomer. Here's the best analogy I can give you. Here's the best one. Let's say there's 12 of us and we're going to a cancer meeting. All of us, there's 12 of us, all of us have cancer, but only one thinks he has cancer. So 11 have cancer, 11 thinks he has cancer. And we go to these meetings and we share about what it's like to have cancer, what it's like to go through chemo, what it's like to go through the pain, and all the vitamins we have to take and different medications. And then it comes to the one who thinks he has cancer. He goes, I ain't like you guys. I don't need to take all these medications. I don't even need to do chemo. I just need to think right and hang out with you guys. And then the guy who's supposed to speak last has cancer and he's new. And he says, you know what? If this guy doesn't need to do that chemo stuff, neither do I. Exact same thing happens in Alcoholics Anonymous. The real alcoholic must do the steps and live the very same steps daily that led him to freedom. The biggest mistake real alcoholics make is not doing that daily inventory. You know, we must always continue to improve our relationship with God and take others through the same process over and over and over again. You know, that's no joke. We must live the rest of our lives in a spiritual basis, or else go back to the cycle of drinking. Have a picture of my friend over here next to me. He's an amazing guy. He's the one that told me, hey, quit going to these meetings every day and focus on the big book. And I love meetings, don't get me wrong, I still go to meetings. But he got me into the big book. The problem is he stopped doing step 10 about 5 years later. He's dead now. He drank himself to death. So the chapter to the wives has even more details about drinkers, and we're going to go to that. This is kind of, I call this the hidden stuff about real alcoholics and stuff. And page 108. And this has kind of a breakdown of the progressiveness of each one. This is a good description of the hard drinker. And, you know, I mean, I sponsored one guy, before I mention this, sponsored one guy that he drank normally for years. But due to his age and also going to the death of his wife, he drowned himself to alcohol, and he progressed into a real alcoholic by the time he was 58 years old. And he could handle his liquor up until then. Pretty crazy. Seen it happen before, but most people don't go through that. I've seen it happen. It says, number one, your husband may be only a heavy drinker. It's a hard drinker. His drinking may be constant, or it may be heavy only on certain occasions. Perhaps he spends too much money on liquor. It may be slowing him down mentally and physically. So it screws with his life, but he does not see it. Sometimes he is a source of embarrassment to you and his friends. He is positive. He can handle his liquor, that it does not do no harm, that drinking is a necessity to his business. He would probably be insulted if he were called an alcoholic. This is full of people like him. Some will moderate or stop altogether, and some will not. Of those who keep going, a good number will become true alcoholics after a while. So here's the early stage of real alcoholic. Her husband is showing a lack of control, for he is unable to stay on the water wagon even when he wants to. It's a good indicator right there. He often gets entirely out of hand when drinking. He admits this is true, but is positive that he will do better. He has begun to try, with or without your cooperation, various means of moderate or staying dry. Maybe he is beginning to lose his friends. His business may suffer somewhat. He is worried at times, and he becomes aware that he cannot drink like other people. He sometimes drinks in the morning and throughout the day also, to hold his nerves in check. He is remorseful after serious drinking bouts and tells you he wants to stop. But when he gets over the spree, he begins to think once more how he can drink moderately next time. I remember those days. It says, we can think this person is in danger. These are the earmarks of real alcoholic. Perhaps he can still tend to his business very well. He is by no means everything as among ourselves he wants to stop. I mean, that's me when I was young, and the only business my drink got in the way of was selling drugs. So it's like, you know, but that was me when I was young right there, starting to lose control. Here is the later real alcoholic. You know, he is bad, but not all the way there yet. This is number 3. This husband has gone much further than husband number 2. Though once like number 2, he's become worse. His friends have slipped away. So this is like the next level. His home is in near wreck. He cannot hold a position, so he's unemployable now. Maybe the doctor has been called. They are weary. The worry around the sanitariums and hospitals has begun. For some of us, that's maybe getting arrested too. He admits he cannot drink like other people, but does not see why. He clings to the notion that he will yet find a way to do so. He may have come to the point where he desperately wants to stop but cannot. His case presents additional questions which we shall try to answer for you. You can be quite hopeful of a situation like this. Let's look at this last one. Here's the late stage alcoholic. Number 4. You may have a husband whom you completely despair. He has been placed in one institution after another. He is violent or appears definitely insane when drunk. Sometimes he drinks on the way home from the hospital. And some of us have done that before. Perhaps he has had delirium tremens, that's the horrible shakes. Doctors may shake their heads and advise you to have him committed. Maybe you've already been obligated to put him away. This picture may not be as dark as it looks. Many of our husbands were as far gone, yet they got well. There's hope. You know, what's interesting is someone asked me a great question one time. Why is the real alcoholic paragraph so short? And why is the paragraph number 4 so short? Because the whole book's written about him. Right? Let's go back to 21. So this paragraph here gets deep, very deep. And this is pretty much the closing paragraph of today. And there's a lot more about the alcoholic right here. Not just that little paragraph. Here's a fellow who's been puzzling you, especially in his lack of control. He does observe incredible tragic things while drinking. He is a real Dr. Jekyll Mr Hyde. So let's talk about Dr. Jekyll Mr Hyde. So Dr. Jekyll is a great physician who makes this potion and drinks it and transforms himself into a monster. Mr Hyde. He's an evil creature without compassion and remorse. He terrorizes the streets and scares people and kills people even. He goes on a rampage. The potion wears off and he turns back into Jekyll. And when he hears the stuff he did, thinking something is wrong with the potion, so he tries to control it. He makes it stronger. He turns into Hyde. He's off again. He turns back into Jekyll. He's obsessed. Get the potion right. He tries it again. He's back again. What eventually happens is Hyde kills Jekyll. Just like Mr. Hyde is the real alcoholic. The real alcoholic was going to kill Steve. He knows what's going to happen, but has the inability not to pick up the potions because he's an obsession of the mind. Dr. Jekyll Mr. Hyde is a story of addiction, experimentation, denial, attempt to quit, complete insanity. It's the cycle of drinking from doctor's opinion. Restless, irritable, and discontent when dry, trying to get it right. The story is written by Robert Louis Stevens, who wrote Treasure Island as well. He was alcoholic. And when he was writing a love story, I forget the name of it, and it turned into Dr. Jekyll Mr. Hyde because he got off alcohol and he couldn't write the story. He was shaking. Well, they had a great remedy for alcohol in those days, especially DTs, called cocaine. So they gave him cocaine to deal with his alcoholism. And so when he's writing Dr. Jekyll Mr. Hyde, he's on a cocaine run. And so he's describing what he went through, the whole story. And it's very interesting that story, Dr. Jekyll Mr. Hyde, is about alcoholism. And Robert Louis Stevens eventually died from alcoholism. He's a brilliant person. Here's a fellow's in puzzling, especially his lack of control. He does incredible, tragic things while drinking. He's a real Dr. Jekyll Mr. Hyde. He is suddenly mildly intoxicated. He is always more or less insanely drunk. That doesn't mean slurred speech and falling over himself and throwing up in a garbage can and all that. It means he has to constantly put alcohol into his system. I had to constantly put alcohol in my system just to get out of bed in the morning and to continue through the day, and a couple of pills to help here and there. I'll get more into that. But his disposition, his character, so his character while drinking resembles his normal nature but little. He may be one of the finest fellows in the world. So it says his character, it doesn't resemble, but he says he may be one of the finest fellows. You let him drink for a day, he becomes disgustingly, even dangerously antisocial. Interesting. Maybe he's a social person, but then pulls away. He has a positive genius for getting stuck, tight. That's what stuck means, at exactly the wrong moment, particularly when some important decision must be made or engagement kept. How many times are we late somewhere because we're doing our thing in the morning, whatever that is, drinking, drugs, whatever. The wedding starts at 2 o'clock and it's 5 o'clock. We're lucky to get there. Or our jobs. You're late again. Important decision or engagement kept. So, we're so antisocial. We get violent when we start harming others. Remember the circles of engulfment we talked about last night. We can't keep an appointment. Our whole, our word's no good. How do you know someone's spiritual when their word's good? If your word's no good, you don't have it. Which hurts our family and our friends. We relate with this. More harms. Indication, inventory must be done. Let's see what else we do. He often possesses he's often perfectly sensible and well balanced concerning everything except liquor, meaning he has a little bit of common sense except when alcohol's in his body or prior to drinking. But in that respect, he's incredibly dishonest and selfish. It's interesting here. He's getting into these words of defects of character. Honest, dishonest and selfish. People say, like I said last week, people say, oh, the only person that ever harms is myself. Or I don't have any resentments. I don't fear no one. Dishonest and selfish is pretty indicator you have all of those. Dishonesty is the act of lying, stealing, cheating, deceiving people. Think about that. Selfishness, again, I said earlier, tending mostly to my own needs with little or no thought of others. So what happens when we get selfless? Tending mostly to the needs of others with little thought of my own needs. Quite a turnaround, right? Do you see why they ask us to be rigorously honest? Why they ask us to do, that thorough inventory and make amends? And it asks us to do it, dedicate the rest of our lives to helping other people. He often possesses special abilities, skills, and aptitudes and a promising career ahead of him. So did Dr. Jekyll. He had special aptitudes, skills, and a promising career ahead of him. He uses his gifts to build a bright outlook for his family and his friends, for his family and himself. Is this interesting? I don't build up an outlook to feel better about myself anymore. I have an outlook so I can help others. But this person uses his skills to build a bright outlook for his family and himself, and then pulls the structure down in his head by selling a series of sprees. Remember going, to rehab or meetings, and our family is proud of us, those first times we went, they have a positive outlook for our future, and we pull the structure down in their head by selling a series of sprees. Transformation through the steps must occur. We must change. He is a fellow who goes to bed so intoxicated, out sleep the clock around. I relate with that. Yet early the next morning, he searches madly for the bottle or perhaps the bag he misplaced the night before. If he can't afford it, he might have liquor or whatever else he does conceal all of the house. That's why they call it a stash. To be certain no one gets his entire supply away from him and throw it down the waste pipe, flush it down. Normal people don't do that. Normal people don't have it stashed all around their house. Normal people don't start yelling at their family for, doing the rest of their stuff that they forgot they did the night before. But now it goes deeper. As matters go worse, he begins to use a combination of high-powered sedatives, Xanax, Ativan, and liquor to quiet his nerves, just so he can go to work or just walk out the door. Then comes a day when he simply cannot make it and gets drunk all over again. Perhaps he goes to a doctor who gives him morphine, a little oxy, fentanyl, Dilaudid, Suboxone. That's a new kid. That's a new fun thing to do, I guess. Everyone's doing. Or, a sedative, Valium, to taper off. Then he begins to appear in hospital sanitariums, detox and rehabs. Dr. Bob did all that stuff. I mean, that's one reason Dr. Bob kept going. And it could work because he had all those drugs. But you don't do drugs in AA, you can't talk about it. There's plenty of drugs in this book. So I remember reading this and I'm like, how do they know this stuff? I remember thinking, how do they know this stuff? Especially the pill part. Because I remember taking Dilaudid, and taking it a few times I'd go to bed with alcohol. I would take it to wake up in the morning with alcohol, take 2 or 3, go back to sleep at night, take 2 or 3 during the day, maybe a little, other drugs during the day, drink all day, 2 or 3 hours more, and start drinking at night, do a little speed just so I can, have extra drinks, and then take the downer to go back to bed, and then start, get alcohol poisoning because I keep drinking. I would come out of a blackout driving the wrong way in a freeway. I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem with this. I got this thing. This chapter tells us that we're a real alcoholic. And, the question I mentioned, are hard drinkers dangerous? They're only dangerous if real alcoholics follow them. Are they welcome in Alcoholics Anonymous? Our traditions tells us that yes, they are. Anyone that tells us to tell them to shut up and go away is wrong. It's not right. But we can tell people. So what's our job? It's not to harm people. We're not soldiers in Alcoholics Anonymous that run around and tell people we're real alcoholics and we're a badge. Our job is to tell the solution at meetings. To pull the newcomer to the side and say, hey, can I talk to you a little about what an alcoholic is? That's our job. That's our job. And to bring it, to truly bring this message of recovery. To truly bring the message of recovery. That's what it's about. We have the knowledge. Why wouldn't you want to? I'm not talking just at meetings. I'm talking about sponsoring. The minute I don't sponsor, I'm not doing the steps anymore. So I have to bring this message. I have to. So next week, we'll get more into the obsession and we'll get into the solution as well.